Green Gold, Dark Harvest, a Misho Akan novella by Dan Mason. Part 2. As the SUV drove away, leaving a plume of dust, Mateo felt a cold dread settle over him. The sun still shone, the avocados still hung heavy on the branches, but the light had dimmed. The green gold had begun to show its dark roots. Chapter 3. The Squeeze. Paying the quota became a monthly ritual of humiliation and fear. Mateo would count out the pesos, his hands trembling, and hand them over to El Cuervo, or one of his men. Each transaction felt like a piece of his soul being chipped away. Elena grew quieter, her laughter for Sofia more forced. They cut back on everything, even small comforts. "It's like running faster into a sea that is rising to drown us," Elena whispered one night, echoing a sentiment Mateo had heard from other desperate farmers. The cartels, Mateo learned, weren't just extorting. They were diversifying, just as Don Ricardo had warned. They were buying up land, often through intimidation or by simply seizing it. There were rumors of illegal deforestation, ancient forests cleared with brutal efficiency to make way for new avocado plantations, owned directly by the criminal groups. The drug traffickers became armed loggers, Don Ricardo told Mateo one evening, his voice heavy with sorrow. In just 3 years, half of Chiran's forests were lost. Now they plant avocados there, making the loss permanent. The pressure intensified. El Cuervo began to demand not just money, but control. He wanted Mateo to use their preferred packing house, their transport. He hinted at investment opportunities, thinly veiled demands for Mateo to sell a portion of his land. "We need more space for our operations, Señor Vargas," El Cuervo said, gesturing vaguely towards a pristine section of Mateo's orchard. "A partnership, you might say. You keep your trees, but we manage this section. For everyone's benefit." Mateo knew what that meant. It was the beginning of the end. He had heard stories of farmers who partnered only to find themselves stripped of their land, their livelihoods, and, sometimes, their lives. Chapter 4. The Breaking Point. The breaking point came not with a direct threat to Mateo, but to his neighbor, old Tomas. Tomas, a stubborn man who had always refused to pay the quota, woke one morning to find his entire avocado orchard, his life's work, ablaze. The flames licked at the pre-dawn sky, a horrifying beacon of the cartel's power. Tomas, heartbroken, packed what little he had and left El Porvenir, another refugee of the Green Gold War. Fear gripped the village. Meetings were held in hushed tones behind locked doors. Some suggested forming an autodefensa, a self-defense group, as other communities had. But the stories of those groups were mixed. Some fought bravely, only to be crushed. Others became just another gang. "We cannot fight them with machetes against their rifles," Elena pleaded with Mateo, tears streaming down her face. "Sofia, we have to think of Sofia." Mateo looked at his daughter, sleeping peacefully in her small bed. He thought of his grandfather, of the land that had sustained them for generations. He thought of the blood avocados, the fruit of his labor now stained with the violence of others. The next day, El Cuervo arrived, his smile wider than usual. "So, Señor Vargas," he purred, "have you considered our generous offer regarding your land?" Mateo looked at the man, at the black SUV, at the distant smoke still rising from Tomas's ruined orchard. He felt a cold resolve harden within him. He had no illusions of victory, no grand plan to defeat the cartel. But he knew he couldn't give them his land, not without a fight, however small. "My land is not for sale, El Cuervo," Mateo said, his voice surprisingly steady. and I will not partner with you." El Cuervo's smile vanished. His eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Mateo saw the raw, unmasked menace behind the polite facade. "You are making a grave mistake, farmer," he hissed. "A very grave mistake." Chapter 5. The Enduring Struggle. The days that followed were a blur of tension. Mateo and Elena barely slept. Every distant engine sound, every shadow, sent a jolt of fear through them. They harvested what they could quickly, knowing time was running out. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long purple shadows across the groves, Mateo stood alone amidst his trees. He ran his hand over the rough bark of an old avocado tree, a tree his grandfather had planted. He thought of the land, the earth that had fed his family, now a battleground. He knew he couldn't stay. The threat was too real, the stakes too high. For Sophia, they had to leave. It was a bitter, soul-crushing decision to abandon the land that was part of their very being. But survival for now meant retreating. As he looked out, he saw a small, gnarled avocado seedling pushing through the rich soil near the edge of the orchard, a seedling he hadn't noticed before. It was tiny, vulnerable, yet determined. Mateo knelt, gently touching its tender leaves. He knew the cartels would likely take his land, clear it, and plant their own trees. But this small, defiant sprout, born of this very earth, was a reminder. The land would endure. The spirit of the farmers, though bruised and broken, would find new ground. The next morning, under the first light of dawn, Mateo, Elena, and Sophia walked away from their home, carrying only what they could. They left behind the green gold, the trees that had been their life, and the shadows that had consumed their peace. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with the daunting task of starting anew. But as Mateo glanced back, he held on to the image of that small, resilient seedling, a silent promise that even in the darkest harvest, life would find a way to grow. The fight for the green gold, for the soul of Misho Akan, was far from over. To be continued. Maybe. Please like and subscribe to continue the saga. Please make some noise in the comments.